Hello there, and welcome to the last of the 7 Absolute Art Fundamentals course. Today we are going to be looking at texture. And what is texture? Well, you may think of texture in the way that you see here in terms of physical 3D objects. You may think of particularly stone and marble, or wood, or even the feeling of fur from an animal. But these are textures that already exist, and if you were to be doing like a physical art course where you may be sculpting or carving something out of wood, you would use these, but you would naturally come across them and you wouldn't have to worry too much about them. So what we're talking about here today is, when we refer to texture, is the 2D textures. That is the visual feel of a piece, presenting how a work may feel when it is touched, and not just physically, but emotionally too. For example, we may have the notion of feeling ice cold. We can look at this piece here and we can think, oh, that may be a bit chilly to touch. You may think of like hot coals, and just looking at them and like the textures involved in them, you get the feeling that you don't want to be grabbing hold of these. And you may even have like a bit more of an emotional feel, like you may feel like a soft cushiony feeling by simply looking at this and thinking how nice it would be to be wrapped up in that. So how do we handle texture? Well, just like spacing is the window to good composition, texture is the window to the abstract. And you may see a lot of art tutorials out there on textures which simply show you how to create textures, and they'll do it more via examples. So you may see like wood and they'll show you how to create wood in a square, and then like do a similar square and try to create metal or brickwork. And we'll be covering examples like this too. But what I really wanted to bring here is the idea of how to be able to create any texture yourself. The idea of saying like, oh, I need to get something that's like fox fur or something that's like bear fur, and you want to know the difference. And how do you really get those ideas and transform them into textures that you can then create in your artwork? And we're just going to be covering those here. The key to creating a good texture is abstractification. That is, getting the item, referring to it in a real-world sense, and then breaking it down, bringing it to its base elements so that we can properly create it. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to use an example of wood, and we're just going to look at this. So this is the wood from a particular tree. I don't know which type of tree it is. And we can see here what the wood may look like if it was to be more abstractified. So if we just quickly, for an example, just take a few pieces of it, we can see that this tree is made up of lots of different straight, jagged lines. And we can bring them together like this. We can see there's little bits here, chunkier bits here, nice, long, elongated bits here. And then we can remove them. We can begin to see that we get a sort of notion of the texture here. And that's really all texture is. It's breaking down materials into their abstract parts and then replicating them with your particular medium. So if you were painting this, you may choose instead, rather than to draw the lines, to instead draw the blocks as shapes and paint them in. And we can see when we do that, we create a similar feeling. So rather than just outlining them, we create the shapes of them. Let's take another example here and look to the material of water. So we take the water material and we see here that these are essentially lots of wavy horizontal lines. So we can see here a bit of line here, a bit high here. We can see that how the light is captured here between. So we have like lighter. We see that we have lighter parts and we have darker parts, as well as a more mid-range, and so we try to capture them in our space. And the key here really is just breaking down those individual details and just making them part of a whole. You don't have to simply trace all the lines. You can just simply take the idea of it. So that water here is usually lots of little squiggly lines that show water. And you can see that even just here, you get a general feel of it. Now, context can be important too. Like, it would actually be very easy to make this go from looking like water to a piece of wood. If I added a few circles here, a bit more grain, just a bit of a straight edge here, maybe a crack here in the wood, and you can see that's gone from looking less water-like and more like a piece of laminate flooring. So context can be very important when it comes to texture. You could actually be repeating the same texture method across a range of materials, but when those materials are essentially placed next to each other in your art, they do clearly look like different items, and the texture helps emphasize that. Let's take one more example, one that's a bit more complex. Let's take the idea of fur. And we can see here again that fur is essentially just lots of little lines like this. But simply doing this, you may find not being enough. What you essentially want to do is start creating patterns for yourself that can help replicate the idea of it. So with fur, this may not be the best example here, but we can essentially begin to get the idea of having like clumped areas. So if we bring it over here, we may start using a particular shape that we can repeat over and over again. So I'm just essentially using two different types of curved line which come together. And then within them, I may do even smaller curved lines. And then I may just do a few little more abstract lines and ticks by themselves. And you can see here, we very quickly capture a basic idea of fur. So this is the takeaway of the lesson here. I don't want to bombard you with different examples of texture. Any tutorial can do that. What I really want to take here is the ability to create your own textures, to simply decide, okay, I need this texture, like, say, a particular wallpaper pattern, or how a paintbrush may look furry, how a wooden door may look like it has splinters in it. What you want to essentially do is be able to take reference photos, and feel free to just grab as many reference photos off the internet as you want and use them. What I recommend you do is simply type in something like wooden door splinters and see what results you get. And if you get like a nice photo there, use that photo as a particular reference. Don't try to avoid other people's art and how they've done it. Look to how you could do it yourself. Get that photo of a physical object in the real world and just look to see what lines you can take from it, what shapes you can build up from it in order to help create it. And try to do this on a variety of the same material. You may find that the same type of material can actually vary wildly. You may find that many wooden structures will have one particular pattern that may be lots and lots of straight lines with a few circles in it. But you may also find you have wooden examples where it's essentially bits of wood that have been pieced together in a factory process, creating an interesting jagged pattern effect. But they themselves also still contain the aspects of the wood. Textures are great because really when it comes down to it, you can play around with them, you can try a variety of things, and in many ways there's no wrong answer with these. What you've got to do is you've just essentially got to capture the feel of it. You don't have to follow a particular pattern every time to distinguish what's, a dusty piece of ground. What you simply have to do is catch that feel of it, and you may do it via doing like just a series of lots of dots to imply there's just lots of little grains everywhere. You can do it via having little stones about the place. You can do it by having a few dust trails, or you can then bring them all together to create the interesting feeling of ground brought by that texture. So give this a go, experiment like crazy, and just build lots of different textures up together yourself. I hope you enjoyed these absolute art fundamentals, so there will be more videos about this in the future. I'll be extending beyond the fundamentals and moving into what I tend to consider the more foundational aspects of art and the more intermediate aspects, and we'll see how we go from there. I hope you enjoyed these videos and enjoy making your art.